Hello people, how you doing? Scotty. So we're literally months away now from the EU referendum. This is the referendum for Britain, whether it's to stay or to leave the European Union.
I'm no communist, I'll tell you that right now. I believe a man should own his own house and car and cow. I like this private ownership, I want to be left alone. Let the government run its business and let me run my own.
You know something, I'm not really going to build my hopes up on everything, simply because the fact that I know how anti-democratic these people are. Of course, we've got the evidence of how anti-democratic it is. You only have to look at when they kicked Berlusconi out and they replaced him with one of their own. They did the exact same thing to the leader of Greece. And then you've seen, of course, the Lisbon Treaty 2008, when they were anti-democratic towards Ireland with their no. And, you know, it was just, it didn't surprise me when I saw what had recently happened with the Dutch vote. Now, that just goes to show you the level of ignorance there is. And I'm not talking about just the nature of how anti-democratic it is. I'm talking about the very people who sit and stare that in the face and continue on supporting this. What it all comes down to is the agenda with the left, and that's really all what it is. You probably sit there and think to yourself, but how can they do that? Why would they do that? Well, that's the left for you. You know, they're not interested in facts, reason and logic. They're not. They would have accepted Hong Kong was a success years ago, but they don't. And you get these same type of people, and this is a sad thing, you get these sort of people who bang off about how we need to strike a right balance between capitalism and socialism, and at the same time they're complaining about corporatism, which is just remarkable. They actually try to blame the free market for all of this. You've probably seen a video going around of Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin, who goes on about, you know, how the machines left people in want. Just listen to this.
Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want.
It was no different with Danny DeVito. Danny DeVito comes out with all of this nonsense about his support of Jeremy Corbyn, and of course he does support Bernie Sanders, and he says that these are the types of politicians that speak the truth.
Also Jeremy Corbyn, by the way. Yes, big time. I like the idea of people telling the truth. I think he would make a great PM. Better than Cameron? Oh yeah, way better than Cameron, and forget about, listen, look at your history.
So the first one I want to touch upon is, of course, Charlie Chaplin, where he talks about how the machines left people need and greed and want and all the rest of this nonsense. I don't think people understand how important the machines were. You know, it's all this nonsense where people believe that government was their saviour. But oh no, oh, where would we be if it wasn't for government? Oh, government, oh, I love you, government. If it wasn't for you, oh, the sky would all cave in, we'd all die. It's laughable. It really is laughable. And it's because people don't understand the history. It's the same thing with the NHS. It's become a religion in the church. Yet if you ask anybody, you ask them, what is the alternative? They don't know. They don't know. And and I had this argument, and I'm not kidding. A woman said to me that, of course, in the 19th century, I want to take things back to the 19th century, where women died giving childbirth. I'm sorry to say, but it wasn't the NHS that basically put a stop to that. Things were improving over a period of time. Medical discoveries were being founded, and that wasn't because of some government and its legislation. That wasn't because of some NHS that came about in 1948. That was because over a period of time things were improving. Isn't it funny how the most innovative time period in our history was when we had largely, you wouldn't say it was a truly free market, but you say it was largely a freer market. Isn't it funny how that was a more innovative time period in our history, and yet you look at today and it's less innovative? It's the same thing with the Scandinavian countries. They're less innovative, they're less productive. Now the high GDP of, say, Norway for example, it gets its high GDP because of the fact it's the 5th largest oil exporter in Western Europe. Or was. Until recent, of course. They abused the North Sea oil for the past 5 decades. This nonsense about the 18th century, 19th century, and they say about the machines leaving people and need, greed, want and all the rest of this nonsense, where Charlie Chaplin comes out and says that. You know, I'm sorry to say this, but if it wasn't for those machines, which, you know, led to mass production, that capital led to mass production of food as such, then people would have still have been dying of starvation. Of course, what largely put a stop to the famines was the private ownership of land. It was called the enclosure movement. Before that you had what you called communal farming, and they were faced with the free rider problem. And the free rider problem basically meant that when somebody dropped their work rate by about 50%, right, the rest of the group know that at the end of the day, that person that's dropped his work rate by 50% is going to get the same as the rest of them. So then they saw this and they dropped their work rate, and before you know it, there was nothing. That's why in Jamestown in 1607, most of the settlers that settled into Jamestown died of starvation. They died of starvation because of the free rider problem. It was the private ownership of, you know, land that put a stop to that. And that's what the enclosure movement was. However, the important point being, the machines allowed people to mass produce, and they mass produced the food. And that's what allowed and enabled more food to get around everyone. Right? So, here's the point. Not only did it enable more things to go around for everyone, which everyone was better off as a result of it, right? It also reduced the working hours. Think about it. Could you do a job faster working with your hands than you could working with the machines? No, you couldn't. There's no way that you could. I'm going to give you an example. Here's something so simple to understand. If you were out in the field and you were digging with these, are you honestly trying to tell me that a bunch of guys, or in that time period, when women or whatever, but are you trying to tell me that you could do a faster job with these than you could with one of these? Are you honestly having a laugh? You see, that's the problem with people. They don't like the truth. And the truth is that government and its legislation was not what reduced the working hours, was not what put an end to these famines. The enclosure movement and the private ownership of land is what put a stop to that, and the mass production through the capital. Even washing machines and dishwashers that enabled you to free up your time to go and do other things, other chores. That's how important the machines were. I understand the message that Charlie Chaplin was trying to put across. I do. But it's not the right message. It's not right telling people that, oh, we must, put a stop to this productivity. We must put a stop to this evil capitalism, this evil... He was a socialist. That's who he was. It's not the right answer. And that's why you end up in the mess that you're in. because of that. It's as simple as that. So that's what the problem is, you know? And unfortunately, a lot of people buy into that crap. And it's the same thing with these people who, when it comes to this European Union referendum, you know, it just reminds me of the whole Scottish independence referendum all over again. It does. It's the same thing. It's no different. And two sides of the argument. You hear from all these people who support the European Union. I can't fathom them. I just don't. All these, you know, all the people in the Scottish independence referendum, the yes voters, most of them were all crying out for state health cares. You know, let's protect the NHS. Let's state pensions, state this and state that and state this, that and the next thing. Do you want to know the primary reason why your government became as self-serving as it did? Because you put the economy, you depended upon the state for healthcare, you depended upon the state for education, you enabled it, the power to tax you, the income tax, the theft. You gave it the power. Collectivism cannot avoid corporatism in practice. Collectivism cannot avoid the self-serving government in practice. It just can't. Why else do you think, you know, J. Douglas, a Labour Party politician before Thatcher's period, came out and said in his own words, the gentlemen of Whitehall really do know what's best for the British people than the British people do themselves. That's what he said. He made that clear. And that was no different to Tony Blair. His own attitude was self-serving. You want to know why he's self-serving? You want to know why they're so self-serving? Because they cannot know and they do not know the needs and wants of the people. It's impossible. How could they? But at the same time, they want that central power and authority because it's what makes them wealthy. So instead of the attitude of serving you, they have the attitude of let's, you know, serve for what we, the politicians, we think is best for the people. Because central planning doesn't work. It's impossible. Because you're faced with the economic calculation problem, where the government doesn't understand the needs and wants because it distorts the information of profits and losses. And that causes the misallocation of scarce resources. Things like the NHS were a failure long before everything to do with this current immigration crisis. All of these things were, you know, going down the toilet long ago. It's what largely contributed to the 5 trillion plus debt. People don't understand. People don't realise what trouble Britain is in. They live in this fairy tale world where they seem to think, you know, that it's just a case of leaving the European Union and that's it. It's not. That's how serious the problem is. And the European Union is a massive burden. So, to all of, you out there who do support leaving the European Union, you have my respect. Because you're trying to save Britain. However, please take heed. Please take notice that it's not the end of things. That, it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to go. A hell of a lot more. But I'm not going to build my hopes up. And as you know, the reason why I won't build my hopes up is because of how anti-democratic they are. But it's just remarkable the amount of people who still support the European Union, even after what we just saw happen in, Netherlands. It's just unbelievable. But, that's just sadly one of those things. The left are, a lot of them are brainwashed. However, there's the type who are religious of it. They would love to be the Stalins, the, dictators. But they don't realise that they're the first people to be put in line and shot dead. Throughout recorded history, it's just remarkable. The amount of people have been massacred. The amount of people who have been killed, and something, it's just History has a terrible habit of repeating itself, and these people never listen. They're not interested in history. They're so far gone. It's unbelievable. So I share the frustration. Trust me, I've argued with these people for the past 4 or 5 years. It's like talking to a brick wall. You get nowhere with them. So the only people I try to reach out to are those who I know are willing to listen. Holding on to all of this socialist nonsense is not going to fix the problem. The free market was not the fault of why we're in this mess today. Capitalism's not to blame. You know, the reason why you have this corporatist system today is a result of the mixed economy. So these people who think it's just a case of mixing the public and private sector together, they don't understand. And this is what I'm talking about. The whole Scottish independence referendum was the same thing. On both sides, both were arguing in favour of state this and state that and state this, that and the next thing. We must protect the NHS. We must protect all this nonsense. They don't understand. These politicians are not telling you the wholehearted truth. Not all of it is down to corruption. Some of it is down to the fact that Britain cannot afford things like the NHS. But however, it is important to say that things like the PFI etc. of what we've seen and what Nigel Farage was rightly complaining about, that was corporatism. It's not capitalism. It's just like today's current rail system that you have in, for example, England, that's privatised, they say. It's corporatist. It's over-regulated by the state and it's given Virgin Rail a monopoly. So, that's not a free market. That's not capitalism. Capitalism's about fierce competition. In other words, Virgin would have fierce competition on their back. But they don't have that. And is it any surprise, when I made the video before on, and I respect him for his business and he does help smaller business people, I understand that, but Sir Richard Branson has his own self-interest. And it's the reason why he is defending the European Union. All of these big corporate elites are defending the European Union for that reason. They're doing so because it benefits themselves. It doesn't benefit the small business people. It doesn't. And this is why we need to get out of the European Union. We're stuck in something that's, a big nanny state. That when you see the failure of countries like France, Spain, Italy, Portugal, and even Greece, for Christ's sake, for crying out loud, who is it that's left to bail them out? They're trying to force people, the good, honest, hard-working people of this country, to pay for them. Why? It's a disgrace. And you can never become wealthy, because every time you gain money, they're trying to bail out something else, and bailouts has got nothing to do with capitalism. Whoever calls this European Union some sort of free market movement or capitalist movement don't even know what they're talking about. They don't, and it's not even free trade. It isn't. There's a reason why Nigel Farage was calling to get out of the European Union to bring on free trade. Free trade is capitalism. We don't have that. We have this big massive corporatist system, which is just all these hypocrites who say, oh, I hate corporatism, I hate TTIP and all the rest of this. They hate that, but there they are defending the European Union. You feel like putting your head through a brick wall. It's unbelievable. When are people going to waking up? And it came of no surprise why these type of people were actually more or less defending these terrorists. They're turning a blind eye to it like it doesn't even exist. Because for me, as far as I'm concerned, it's part of their agenda. You know what? You want to know what the Soviet Union supported? Destroying nationality. Destroying all national feelings. That's what it was all about. It was all about trying to create a Soviet people. To basically try and destroy and suppress all national feelings. Is it any surprise why, you're seeing the exact same thing through the European Union? Because that's what they're trying to do. You notice how Merkel wasn't even paying attention? You noticed how even after doing what she did, she just ignored the people and continued on flooding more in? Well, this is what relates to this whole thing with the Dutch. The Dutch voted no. And what did the European Union decide to do? Continued on flooding their country. Maybe with another 45 million, I don't know. I can't remember. But that was more or less the story of it. You see, it's engineered that way. They're trying to destroy all national feelings. Yeah, I'm not, some strongly conservative person. Yes, I have certain conservative values. And in a time like this, it is important, after what our governments have done, that have caused these wars, that caused such hate. And wars don't solve the goddamn problem. It doesn't. That's why I'm against war. But here's the thing. As a result of government's interference and all of that nonsense, what's it led to? People who want to harm us, basically. Who wish to harm our freedom. And all this nonsense about Islam as a religion of peace. I don't buy into that crap for 1 second. At the end of the day, these are people who do want to cause harm. And they wish to, blow people up. I think we've already seen that from the likes of what happened in Brussels, I'm sure it was. The airport attack. And they wish to, try and harm people, shoot people dead, as we saw in Paris, of what I mentioned before. And the left are just so far out of touch. They've got no... They have no sense in touch with reality. Some of these people are let their feelings get the better of them. And it's so sad because the problem is only going to persist. And it's one of these things that Britain in itself is in trouble. Not just from an economic standpoint of view. The supply and demand argument, the more you flood into the country to the ratio of what's available, the higher the cost is going to be. That's not fair on the taxpayer. That isn't. And taxation's theft anyway, I'm against all that. However, for the current time, then it is sensible that you do have controlled immigration. It's sensible because of the fact that you're then able to vet out the right people who come to this country. Not just, any old person. Just open the door to all these type of people who wish to come and blow us up. What sense is that? We've even got people living in this country who admit that they don't respect our British values. Well, you know what I say? Tell them to fuck off. I'm sorry for the language, but it's the truth. They don't respect our British values. They don't respect our British culture. Get lost. Don't come and live here. It's the truth. And I'm sick and tired of all the nonsense. And if that's what makes me racist for having those values, then so be it. But all I'm doing is speaking the goddamn truth. But you see, that's the thing, people. That's something that the left don't like. And all I've got to say with this referendum coming ahead, I do hope that the people in this country have the sense to do the right thing, and that's to vote out. Whatever happens though, if Britain does remain part of this European Union, don't beat yourself down, because at the end of the day, It's not going to last. It isn't going to last. Just look at what Germany's doing to itself. It's committing economic suicide. The unfortunate thing is the fact that people are forced to pay for that. Something tells me that they're going to rig this European Union referendum. But even if that's the case, it isn't going to last. So I would hope that people do have the common sense at least to vote to leave the European Union. But like I say, it just feels disheartening. And I try to get the message out to people that this isn't just a case of vote to leave the European Union and everything will all be fine. You know, the mixed economy doesn't work, and a lot of people sadly support that. All I've got to say is, it's not the fault of capitalism. You've been led up the garden path. It's not the fault of the free market. That's not what caused corporatism. It was government's interference. We would have been better off if we had, remained free market in the late 1800s. But unfortunately that wasn't the case. We had a big expansionist government. Even Margaret Thatcher pointed out between 1888 onwards right through up to 1919. They led us to 2 world wars. Of course, the First World War in that period, and then later the Second World War, and that bankrupted our nation. We were bankrupt. We were a broke nation even after the First World War. We were pushing it, getting into the Second World War. And then all that period of so-called social democracy, the oxymoron ideology. There is only one socialism, people, and that is the path towards communism. Between 1945 and 1979, they couldn't have made that clearer. Their so-called boasting of this, democratic socialism. They ticked off about at least 7 out of 10 of the Communist Manifesto planks. And if you don't understand what the Communist Manifesto planks are, go and search them. Because you'll even find things like free education, the heavy progressive income tax, everything such as the abolishment of private ownership of property. We've seen all of that. There was barely a private sector left in Britain in that period. And today it's just become strongly corporatist, and they're trying to blame this on capitalism. It's just nonsense. Don't buy into all the propagandist nonsense, and don't buy into the propagandist nonsense, just the recent news, that they're trying to claim that the reason for the recession in the European Union is because of Britain leaving. It's got nothing at all to do with Britain leaving. The reason for their mess is their own problems. So anyway, people, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I shall talk to you later. Thank you.